Welcome to part 21 of the XC restoration, and this one's a bit of a go-between video. Few things have happened. I haven't done the engine or any more on the engine in this video because I'm still sorting out this clearancing issue I was talking about in the last one. Training out there. The clearances on the main, one of the mains is a little bit too big. It's still within spec, but I just like it more consistent with the others. Larger clearances on big engine mains are actually alright in a high performance engine because the oil is not just a lubricant, it's also a coolant. And so a lot of high performance engines do have sort of 2,500 clearance, that sort of thing, or 2,000 clearance. They don't go for the standard sort of value at 1.5 or whatever. The crank journals, of course, are the hottest part of the engine when it's running, with exception to the exhaust valves, and so the oil acts as a coolant as well. But I want it all consistent. I'm still liaising with the engine reconditioner or the machine shop about it, so I'm not doing any more on that in this video. This one's more about putting the gearbox back together, having a look at another carburettor I bought, which looks great but isn't. And the other stuff up is I bought another camera, and it was a cheapie. It's a reputable brand. It's a Nikon. It's a DSLR, but it's not a high enough resolution, and the audio is terrible. And I've shot most of this with it. This is the old camera, which is 720p. The new one's 1080. I should have just lashed out another few $100 and got a 4K. Good 4K DSLRs begin at about $800 or so, but because of the cost of what all this is costing with engines and all sorts of things, I didn't spend the money, which was stupid because now I've just wasted it. As far as audio is concerned, I've been having a bit of trouble with it. This camera I'm using now has great audio, but the picture's rubbish. I wanted to sort of be able to produce a clearer picture, which is why I've gone with this other thing. I don't think I'm going to use it again after this. But originally for the voiceovers, I was using this stupid little, what's it called? A condenser mic. And the sound's terrible. I got it off eBay for about $14 or something. And so I bought a good quality dynamic mic, and which has an XLR at the bottom of it, and plugged it in. Of course the computer didn't understand it, so I got a different lead and it still didn't understand it. And so I've got to get a small cheap mixer, which they're about $100 or so, which has a proper microphone preamp, and then voiceover stuff will be nice and clear. And of course I need another camera again because this other one that I'm talking about now is crap, and I want something with an external mic feed or an external mic input so that we get a good picture and also we get good audio. And so I'm shooting for 4K. Now when you shoot video in 4K, it uses an incredible amount of memory and hard disk room, and it's difficult to load them up and all that sort of thing, which is why a lot of people that shoot videos in 4K keep them fairly brief. And so 40-minute videos on a 4K camera would take about 4 years to upload, I imagine. I don't know, I've never used one, but I will start making them a little bit shorter in order to get the quality better. The other issue, of course, is Mother is moving from her house, and I've got 3 cars and a trailer around there, so room is a real problem at the moment, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So I've got to put this back together. That little Starlet, I was thinking about tipping that, but I might use it as a daily drive because I want to keep the mileage off the Commodore. My Commodore's just clicked over 40,000 K, it's immaculate, and I want to keep it that way. And so I want to bring that in here as well, but I've only got room for 4 cars. So I'm in a bit of a pickle at the moment. And so eventually I might end up diversifying a little bit with this channel and getting into some other stuff as well. And I'm thinking, when I was young I used to have these this enormous hi-fi system with surround sound, and had a couple of amps, a couple of graphics, a reverberation amp, and had a tape deck, and I had an open reel recorder, I had all this other stuff. It was all bottom range stuff, it wasn't really good quality, but it sounded fairly good. So I'm sort of thinking maybe getting into some retro hi-fi, doing some repairs, building a proper cabinet, not this MDF or chipboard stuff, building something with a grain, and dumping about 4 litres of clear on it and polishing it up and all this stuff anyway. That's all stuff for the future anyway. I've got to get through all this first. And of course I'm also the shed out the back. The floor's gone in the shed and there were things getting wet, so I pulled the shed off, pulled the floor up, and I've got to fix that up, so there's more crap in here which I don't know what to do with. So this is a go-between video. It's only really gearbox and carburettor and a few bits and pieces in terms of content, so I do apologise for that. I did want to bring something out in a reasonable time frame from what the other ones have been coming. That just didn't make any sense. That made no sense at all, but you know what I mean. So, hope you enjoyed. Right, so we've got the third lot of plating back. And of course, here are some of the front suspension components. This was a bit dearer. This was $80 because there's a lot of small bits and pieces in here, carburettor bits and pieces. And so I'll sort these out and we'll take a quick look. But you've already seen 2 lots of this. The other 2 lots had considerably more stuff in them. And they were $65 each. This was dearer because it had to be put into 2 vats. Right, well these are the bolts that I've had done again, or the third lot of bolts I've had done. This is all carburettor stuff here. There's levers and there's a baffle and there's linkages and there's screws and all sorts of stuff. And I just chucked there the little things that cover the metering rods. And of course the secondary flap, the primary choke flap if you like, is aluminium. So you can't plate that. But anyway, look, that's all there. The little stacks that I've got to straighten out, all sorts of stuff, ventilators, you name it. So that's all good. I can start rebuilding the carburettor at some point anyway. Front suspension arms, of course, they're the bolts there. Got to get some nuts for those. And of course, they're the big broad washers and nuts and so forth that sort of go up against the new bushes we're going to put in. Lots of things like exhaust manifold. And a lot of these things, you know what, that diff breather, there's already one on the car. I'm not going to use it, but I just chucked it all in the box so it's easier and cheaper to do that. And of course, engine, I've got 3 of these for the Clevos, sump and rocker cover type hardware there. But also, these are the taillights, I don't know what that is. That taillight I put in one of the videos, they're the screws, the dirty ones that are pulled out, and the 3/16 nut, so that's a new set ready for another taillight. And the hose clamp, and also bumper bar hardware. That's what these are, the rear bumper hardware when I took that brace out of it. So look, quite a bit more stuff. Don't know if I've got the 2, I've got 4 of the sort of round section U-bolt retainers, and these are just 2 others that I'm kicking around. I don't know which one they use. I think they use the round ones, not the flat ones like that, but it doesn't matter. I can put all these away, bag them and tag them. I won't crap on about bolts anymore because all I do is talk about bolts and the bits and pieces that pertain to putting the car together. And also that's the little spring for the viscous fan coupling. And so I got that done too. That's a bit bent, but anyway, it's all good. Well, here we have our single rail gearbox. I'm not going to call it the single rail, I'm going to call it the cricketer's gearbox because I've painted it and got more runs than Sir Donald Bradman. So it doesn't matter, it looks nice and clean, nice and shiny, all the rest of it. Now I've taken off this cone at the front because I've got to replace the seal in it, and we've got to be really careful because the natural inclination for this thing is to pop out. It's not held in by much at all. And the moment that pops out, of course, we've got all these needle rollers around the back of the output shaft. It'll just sort of fall out everywhere, so we don't want that to come out. Now of course here's the snout for it, which has been all cleaned up, and that's what holds that sort of bearing in place. So the kit was supplied with a new input shaft seal, which is wrong, and we had to get a new one for the V8 Falcon one because it's bigger. This could be for a Cortina or whatever, but that is actually smaller, so I've measured that against the old one, and that can go on. But having said that, the rest of the gaskets and so forth are correct. Now when we put this in, we need to make sure that it's that way, and so the spring is facing the inside so it can't leak out, and so it's just a matter of sort of pressing that into there nice and evenly, which I might have to use a socket for, but it needs to press in here and then sort of sit against the ledge inside there. So I'll just use a socket and I'll tap that in. I've nearly got it now. Well, I've got our seal in. We've got to grease that and just give the input shaft a bit of a grease as well. I've given this a clean up. It's not absolutely there yet in that I've got to just clean some of that surface rust off the end spigot there. But all the splines are nice and clean, so our clutch can slide up and down nice and easily and so forth. We have the gasket, and we need to make sure that we put this in the correct way. It's got a cutout at the bottom, which marries up with that one there, and that of course, this is upside down, drains so that the oil coming through the bearing can drain back to the gearbox through that hole, so it's important to put that in. As far as sealers are concerned, I have 2 favourites. Permatex, which is absolutely great for oil leaks. A little bit around here, pop the gasket on a tiny bit more, not going to bother putting it on there, bang it on, good to go. And of course the other thing that I like using is GM sealer, and this is a rigid sealer which I'll put on the studs, or on the bolts I should say, so no oil can work its way up the threads. Now this will dry hard, but the moment you go to undo the bolt, it'll snap free, so the bolt will just come out. Great for Welsh plugs, things like that as well. So that's what we're going to do while we put it together. So I'm just putting a bit of grease around here. We never ever put a seal in dry, and just in case it drags up and down the input shaft, I'm just going to put some up here. I can always wipe it off, but this is HTB, high temperature bearing, so it's not going to turn to chewy, or sorry, turn to liquid when it gets heat into it. I just want to make sure that that seal stays nice and safe, and so I'm just going to pack in here as well. So I'll just keep going a bit with that until we're ready to put it on. The thing to remember with most sealers is that it's basically a case of less is more. You don't have to have it dripping off. That's not going to do anything except make a mess. This stuff looks like an oil leak when it runs, and so I'm just spreading this out. There's not much on the brush really. I'm just sort of spreading it out. I'm keeping it away from the bearing. Now this will mean that once that seal's on, and once that gasket's on, it'll be destroyed if we pull it off again. Whereas some sealers you can sort of reuse gaskets, with this stuff you don't get that opportunity because it'll stick. And I'm just going to run around here again, just really sparingly, because I've cleaned that face up with auto thinner, and so it's nice and clean. In fact, I'm running out of this. And this sealer, oil never gets past this stuff, and it's only $7 I think for a container like that, and I've had that for a while now. I do go through a bit of it, probably because I'm always mucking around with engines, but push comes to shove, value for money wise it's terrific, and above all else it works. So I'll just go around, finish this bit here, and we're almost ready to plop it on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sit this, there we go. We don't need too much. I'm not using too much. I'm not interested in going crazy with this stuff. So I've got these bolts, and I can put them on now. Before we put them on though, I will put a bit of GM sealer on. And so here it is here. It looks a little bit golden syrupy. I'm just going to drop the end of the bolt in. You can see there, it was really, really big in the 80s, this stuff. People used to use it for everything, but now you sort of don't hear of it so much. Just going to make sure I put that in right. But this is the way I want to do it. And look, if it has to be pulled apart again, big deal. This has only cost like $60 or so to do this, and I think it's a pun worth taking, as I said before. I've decided not to overhaul. It's having an aerosol overhaul, so even though that was done with the gun. The other thing, there wasn't another thing I was going to talk about. So let's put these in. I'll feel more relaxed when this is all sort of done up, and that input shaft can't fly off. Of course, now we've got that sorted. Whoops, it's all greasy. We'll get our nice new sandwich bag, stick it over the input shaft, and tape that up to keep it nice and clean until we're ready to put it in the car. We'll put it on the engine before we put it in the car. Cool. Right, we're on to the extension housing, and here it is here. It's lovely and clean. This hasn't been painted, it was just put in the dishwasher at work, the parts wash. And there's a few things we need to be aware of with it. Firstly, that bush in there, that is replaceable. This one's in very, very good condition, so I'm not going to replace it. The other thing is it's very easy to, while this is on a workbench, pop this seal in. And that's standard of what a Falcon one would look like, and of course that little hole there is so when the yoke goes in and out, it doesn't create suction and drag gear oil out through the seal. That allows this bellow to move in and out without that drawing effect, and that of course just stamps in there. Now this is a wrong one. I think it's a 7300S, and I think that might be for a different type of car. A Ford one, or a Falcon one I should say, is only about $8 anyway, so I'm not worried about that. The other thing we need to do of course is bang a seal into here for the selector shaft, and that comes in the kit, and it's identical to the one that came out, so we can put that in. That's not a problem at all. But one of the things that's really, really important with these to not miss is this little guy here. It's a little shim of steel, and it looked like it dropped out from somewhere up here when I took the extension housing off, and it's actually the retainer for the counter shaft and reverse idler shaft, and it sort of fits in to a groove. Now if we don't put that in, we're in strife. There's a cutout in both shafts, and that sits in there. It's not quite in properly yet, but you get the picture. I can just give that a tap and it'll sit beautifully in there. Oh, there you go, there, I don't even need to. So we mustn't forget to put that in. That is absolutely crucial, so we need that. So much as we did before, a bit of Permatex and a gasket. Gasket comes in the kit. It's the same whether it be a Cortina or a Falcon. That just sort of fits over. Put the tail shaft or put the extension housing on and we're good to go. Of course, with seals, the best way to put them in is with a socket that fits snugly over. We don't want to touch that sealed surface there. We just want to use the socket and give it a tap round so the seal goes in nice and level and seats at the bottom of the rebate that it's designed to sit in. And there it is, of course, in there. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of grease in. I don't want to get the grease around the sealing areas. And I'll also grease up the selector shaft itself so that the seal can run down there without becoming damaged. And then it's just onward and upward from there. We'll put a bit of Permatex around to seal him up. And again, I'm using this on both surfaces of the gasket. It's just a paper gasket. This had like a blue silicone around it when I pulled it apart. These do leak, but hopefully we don't see anything resembling a leak at all when we fill him up with oil. Now those holes down there are blind. They don't go through into the gearbox, so we don't need to use sealer on those. At least I think they're blind. I'm pretty sure. I'll just put a screwdriver down there and make sure. But the ones that are on the input shaft, what do you call it? The retainer, they went into the gearbox. So you can just ascertain that by just dropping something like that in. They're blind holes, so they don't go anywhere. So we don't need to worry about using GM sealer down there. We can just pop the bolts on. Now put this on. I'm going to have to put the seal on later, the extension housing seal. And I'm just watching that, oh, that's the right way. Yeah, I'm just watching that selector shaft seal. It's actually quite hard to, I just don't want it to flick inside out. So I might do something else with that, just a moment. Easy to flick that seal around, that one that was stuck in there from behind. I'm just going to pop the actual selector shaft through there, just so the seal's sitting where it's meant to sit. And then I'm going to start by marrying it up there and then lowering it over, and hopefully, famous last words, hopefully, there we go, we've got it. There we are. And we can just lower that down. I'm watching that bush at the back while I lower the thing down, and we can start bolting him up now. Of course, this was all stuff that was plated. I can get some thinner on a rag and wipe off my dirty marks, but these are the original fasteners, Ajax. They've got the 3 little strokes on them, which means they're grade 5 hardened. And it's important if you replace fasteners to get the hardening correct, because the harder a bolt is, the stronger it is obviously, but also the more brittle. And so you don't want an opportunity where you can put something that's super duper hard but hasn't got enough flex in it, which is what the original one would have. So I'm just going to go around and I'll nip these up. Of course, just like a cylinder head, we'll go around diagonally. And then I'll nip it up when it's horizontal, because it's sort of sitting on a couple of sawhorses and I'm worried about it dropping. But at least if we take our care with it, we should end up with a good unit. That's the selector mechanism case, if you like, which is all nice and clean. Again, this was just putting that dishwasher thing at work, so there's no paint on it. The kit didn't come with that seal there, so I'm just going to reuse that and grease this up, and that'll just sort of plop in there. And then it's a matter of, and that is actually in really good condition too. That sort of checks out really well. And I'm going to reuse this Welsh plug. Now, it's not a loose fit, it's quite a tight fit, and I'm going to clean all this with thinners because I've touched with greasy hands now, and just knock that in with a bit of GM seal around there, and that'll stay there, that'll be fine. I could probably burr the edge of it. There is a sort of a little divot there anyway. Oh, there is anyway, look, there's a few of them. So I might just punch them out from behind, just to give it a bit more grip. Bit of GM sealer, bang him in, and it should be good to go. We can just bolt that to the side of the gearbox. That's cool. Happy. And again, good old high temperature bearing grease, just all around the mechanism. And I'll just put a little bit in the case as well, and that should be fine. Gearbox almost together, or finished being put together. Got this gasket. Now, I'm not going to put any sealer between the bottom of this and the gearbox housing, but I'm going to put some above it, so it'll essentially stick to the tin top, not the gearbox itself, because the tin top is more likely to have a sort of an undulated, what do you call it? It's more likely to be not quite as level as the cast iron casing. So I'm just going to go around and do this. It's a very thin gasket, but it'll sort of do like that. And that should all just sort of locate. Now there's a slot in the top that's designed to, there's the bolt, that's designed to hold one of the selectors. I've got to, I'm fixing the shed out the back, so this garage is absolutely like a hoarder's place. I'm just going to snug them down, just gently. It's a cork gasket, so we don't have to go too far with it, but so far so good. Anyway, that's our gearbox. Looks nice and pretty, doesn't it? Nice shiny top and nice clean unit, complete with electroplated fasteners. So we can just use a bit of thinner on a rag. It's drying out now. I'm cleaning off all that other, excess sealer and that sort of thing. So I'll go around and do that, and leave it at that, I think. Looks good, doesn't it?
No.
No, not that one. Use the other one. We have Gaiety and a horse from Rosie. But just over here, hello Rosie. Hi Charlie. Just over here we have the lean cuisine, and Annabelle. Right, so we've got two Carter thermocoil carburetors, as we said before. We've got this one, which is nice and complete. It doesn't have the anti-run-on solenoid or the throttle bracket there for it, but the rest of it is there and moves nice and freely. I'm going to take this to work and put it into parts wash. The second one we bought, we mentioned in the last video, and it was in diabolical condition, but I did salvage some parts out of it. There's lots of bits and pieces in here. Some had to be thrown out, and of course these are the bits and pieces I took off and had plated. You set the cup of tea, hang on a second. So all your sort of, these odds and ends, brackets and the little butterflies, the metering rod covers and some linkages and all this sort of stuff. All of that was in a big box of electroplating I had done, which ended up costing $80 instead of $65 because it was done in two separate batches. This was put into a sort of a finer basket. So I've got that. And of course we've got this one here, which is a lovely looking one. I've just picked this up off eBay for $155. It's got the proper bracket there, it's got the solenoid and all this sort of stuff that the other one doesn't. And it looks to be in impeccable condition. The only thing, there's two things I don't like about it actually. One is that it's a 9144S, which is a 4.9 automatic XD Falcon carburetor. And the other thing, of course, is it's been put through the parts wash, so it all looks good, which is the other one will come up similarly to what this is, but the metering rods are very raspy. Now this could have a multitude of sins inside, I'm not sure. I'm going to take the cover off and have a quick look just so I know what I've got. Now I'll be relaxed once I know that it's all good, but at the moment I'm just not convinced. Now the problem with online or purchasing parts online is you don't get a really good look at them unless you're prepared to actually do the legwork and run over and take a look, which I wasn't. And so you do run a risk with anything that you purchase online, basically. So it'll be pretty obvious, and you can see it's pretty grungy under there because obviously the parts wash couldn't get through there. But at the end of the day, all I really want to do with this is put a kit through it. That's basically all I want to do. So it remains to be seen as to whether or not I'm going to be able to do that. I've backed the choke right off so the parts wash could get in here. But I'm just going to pop off a few linkages and bits and pieces like this, just so I can take that lid off and have a bit of a look. I wouldn't mind withdrawing that metering rod bracket too, just to see why it's a bit sticky. But whatever the case, it does look to be in much better nick than the other, even though it's clean, or it's still dirty. I'd be surprised if it's half as bad as the other one was. And I'll just take this. I'm having trouble getting this off. How do I get that off? The choke's controlled by this lever. There we go. You can see it's just dirty under there, but that doesn't matter. I'm not worried about that. I'm just keen to just have a bit of explorative surgery and to figure out what's going on. Now I need to find out, I've got to put a bit of Loctite on these butterfly securing things. Come on. Oh, that's alright. I had a real worry. It was just caught here. That's all dirty around there, around that plunger. But I was very worried about the status of the metering rods and the fact that that could have been full of water. That actually smells like fuel. Now, these metering rods and jets under there are going to be no good for this. This is going to have bigger ones, given that the engine's a lot larger than what this came from. So I'll just take some of these linkages off here so I can take the lid off and have a bit of a look inside. And we can see over here that the choke apparatus is actually painted green. So the linkage, the washer and this part here are all painted green, which I sort of knew about because the XD is still like that. I had all these plated anyway, so they're going to be the wrong colour. But that's easily emulated if you want to go back to the stock look. And even though this is as clean as it is, we've still got issues. That was hellish to get off. It's all rusty. So, you know, even though it looks lovely, it's not. Basically, it isn't as good as what I would have hoped. But I do have plated hardware which can be swapped out for this. See, that one's not affected, so it has got moisture in it. If you look at those two together, it has got or had moisture in it. And I'm already faced with my first issue in that this screw here won't come out. So I'm going to spray it and work that into the thread if I can. And then just try and undo it because I don't want to damage the casing, the top casing, or the Bakelite one. So there's obviously rust and scale and all that sort of nonsense. I'm just trying to undo it and let it cut its own thread into its own rot, if you know what I mean, and get it out that way. But if worst comes to the worst and I have to cut it off, it's not a big deal because it's on the outside. I can sort of reach it all. But this is the thing, old parts. And, you know, nothing's perfect anymore. And these are old. This is 40 years old, you know. XD, what's an XD? 1979 to 82, so it's at least 36 years old. Now we've got it now. This one must be pretty badly rusted as well. But anyway, I've got new plated ones of these, so I'm not even too concerned. Doesn't look that bad actually. Just a bit mangy, a bit horrible. So that top should come off now. I just don't want to lever off anything. I just want to let it come off nice and easily, so I'm not really sure how to do that without compromising it really. Let's have a look. I think we've got all the fasteners out now. There we go. Okay, so the gasket's sort of sticking a little bit, but that is to be expected. It does feel pretty rough though. It's a roughie, but it might be alright. Oh, I've got the vacuum hose. So it has had water in it. Look at this. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Yeah, she's not very nice. Let's take that off. We can see around the plunger that's all sort of pretty average, and the floats as well. The arms of the floats are rotted or rusted, but at the end of the day, you know what? It is salvageable. It's very, very salvageable. This is all messy inside here, and there is copious amounts of just sandy like substance there. I don't know what it is, but it does at least smell like petrol. It doesn't smell like anything else really. So look, it's not in great nick, but it's certainly not a dog. I've got a new one of those, a plated one of those. So I'm going to clean this out. I'm not ready to rebuild it yet, but I am going to clean it out and sort of plonk it back together so that when I get a kit for it, we can do a bit of a video on it and make it look really new again. But you can see just how much one would get fooled by, what's this stuff? Yeah. One would get fooled by the fact that it looks so good and yet it still has a lot of issues. It's just got grunge everywhere. I'm of the opinion though that we've got to this right in the nick of time, because it did have moisture in it, or at least the other gentleman got to it in the nick of time, because it did have moisture in it, but it hasn't taken too much hold. So you know what, I'm going to leave this in pieces, and I'm going to take it into work and give it a good clean, because I think it just feels a bit grungy, a bit dirty. I think this needs to be really cleaned up. I've got that little thing there too. I'm sort of half tempted just to take the lid off the other one too and have a look at that, because you know, they're a mess. They're just not very clean. I've just had a bit of an epiphany. I think this thing's been media blasted. That's what that grit is, because if you look on the side here, the media has etched into the Bakelite, and the shadow from the idle up on the choke has shielded that bit, and that's the original finish underneath. So that's what I think all this grit is. I think that's been media blasted and then thrown in the parts wash to make it look as good as what it did. It's still a fair buy. You know, I mean, I'm not sort of that upset about it, but I just think it's a little bit trickery, a little bit sort of leaning towards trickery, if that makes any sense. So yeah, it's not what it certainly isn't what I thought it was. And just by blowing a bit of compressed air in or around it, it's not quite there yet, but it's going to have to be all pulled apart, cleaned properly, just to get rid of any grit and so forth. But it has yielded a little bit of an improvement. Right, so it is tempting when you buy a unit like this to just stick it straight on the car. In fact, somebody with limited experience would probably be tempted to do that. And the issue is, of course, if it is media blasted like I assume this one was, there can be packets or little bits and pieces of grit in the carburettor, which of course is very, very dangerous for the engine. So sellers doing this sort of thing should always make mention that it has been media blasted and needs to be pulled apart and so forth and cleaned properly. So I do think it is a little bit on the trickery side. Whatever the case, drive safely, enjoy your classic, take care, and I'll see you later. Ta-ra.